Hello everyone. I'm going to demonstrate on how you remove a tile from a mold, a plaster mold. Right now I'm trimming any excess plaster that has seeped underneath the tile. I use a utility knife to do that. There's really three or four tools that you can use that all you really need. These three tools here are the best. And then also you want to have a ball of wet clay too. You can use a fork, spoon, anything that you can think of that can pry this up. But over the years, these are what I've found to be the best. This tile is a little bit wet, so that's going to make this easier. So the first step is to take your utility knife and you just very carefully, not too deep, you don't want to cut into the plaster if at all possible, but it's not the end of the world if you do. You just want to remove a section of this. So basically what I'm doing is I'm creating an edge that'll help us pry the tile out. And I do it on all sides of the tile because it just helps it release it. Just like that, okay. Next step is take this tool and you kind of dig in a little bit, just to, enough to see if you can pry it up a little bit. And usually, if the tiles are really wet, it'll work, but a lot of times it doesn't. But you just keep doing this. And you're trying and you're thinking you're going to try to pull this tile out. See? And what'll happen, you can see a little bit of the mold in there. You want to be really careful you don't dig in too deep and hit the mold. It's not the end of the world if you do, as long as you don't hit any vital parts of the tile. If you take a little gouge out of someone's lips or knock their nose off, that could be a problem. If you make a little mark in some waves that you have designed on there, that's probably not going to be a problem. It'll blend in. Remember, the tile's going to shrink 12% from start to finish, and it also is going to be covered in a glaze. So any little nicks or damage you might do, or any little bubbles you see in the plaster, it's not the end of the world. The process of making the tile really will conceal all those damages. But like I said, if you hit a vital part of your design, like take off someone's nose or their lips, it could cause a little bit of a problem. So you just carefully kind of keep doing this, and eventually what will happen is, and maybe you saw it, you see the tiles lifting up. If at all possible, you're trying to get as much of the tile out at once. So you want to just, when you see that you're getting a little bit of lift, you want to try doing this in another spot. Again, you're trying to avoid ripping chunks of clay off at this point once you see the tile coming up, because that means you're loosening it. And eventually, if you just keep doing this, okay. I tried. Sometimes when you try around the edge, when you see that it's lifting up, sometimes the whole thing will lift up. But that's not working. Go back to where it was working, and then try it there some more. Okay. So once you've kind of given that a try, then you're kind of going to use your fingers and your tool and try to pry as much of the design. You see how I'm getting underneath it there? So you just try to figure out how you can grab onto anything to help pull that up. See how I'm even grabbing down here, and then it will all kind of come up. That's pretty good, considering this is a pretty dry tile. Next step, you got to move along here because this video gets too long. It can take forever to download. Next step is you use your utility knife and you just go along the edge. So you're putting your utility knife right, you're holding it against the plaster basically, and you're just trying to remove that trim. So that the trim that made up your edge of your tile, what we're doing is that usually will stick. So we're trying to pry that up. You can see there, you'll have a little bit left over sometimes. Okay, we'll take care of that in a minute. Next step I'm going to do is I'm going to get this ball of clay and get it wet. Another really easy way of doing this is in the summer I go out in the yard and I use the garden hose and I spray. I hold my finger on the hose and I spray the water really hard as in a jet, and that'll clean these little pieces of clay up really quick. You don't want to hold it there for a long time because the plaster will actually get rubbed, blasted off. We'll get kind of smoothed down a little bit by the water, especially when it's wet. But that really cleans these up quickly. So again, I'm just taking this there. Next step is to clean this edge and to make it and give it and to bevel it a little bit. So what that means is, as you'll see here, normally when I cut these tiles, I cut them pretty much straight down, and that's some tile artists might create the bevel when they're carving it. I don't do that because usually you have to use this anyways, so I just do this now. So what you do is you basically are going to just, at an angle, you're going to create a wider, the base of the tile, you're making it wider by doing this, because this is, so I'm taking this tool and then I'm rounding the corners, trying to make it all even. And you just rubbing this up and down and beveling it. What this will do is it'll make the base of your tile wider, and it'll also clean the mold up. But this helps when you're pressing the tiles to have the tiles fall out of the molds easier. And it also makes the edge smoother, because when you're carving the tile, your fingers and your tools will kind of rough up the edges of the tile, and by doing this, you're basically sanding out all those little marks you may have made. And there you go. That's pretty much it. And then to dry this, again, you can take this wet clay, just stick it. And it's okay if you leave some little pieces of clay in there. Like I said, if you go out in the yard and use your garden hose, you'll get almost all of it. But then again, your mold's going to be soaking wet. But I just poured this a couple of days ago, so it's soaking wet anyway. So if you can do it right after you pour the mold, that's best. So here you go. This is ready to dry. If you put it on the on your shelf in your house, up near the ceiling, maybe where it's warmer. 2 weeks, week to 2 weeks, it'll be really nice and dry. You can put it out in the sun for a couple days in the summer. That'll dry it. You can put it in the oven, but you got to be really careful to watch it and not let the oven get too hot. Because if it gets there, if you forget about it for half an hour and it gets really hot, it'll crack the mold. But you can speed dry them in the oven. You just have to baby it. You have to put it in there and take it out and put it back in and leave the door open. There's an art to it. But there you go. Tile mold complete.